Hey there, I'm Sarah A. Chrisman, the author of the Tales of Chetzemoka, and today I'm going to talk to you about the value of writing things out physically. Now, if you've read any of my books or have been following me for any length of time, you probably already know that I write my manuscripts out by hand. And actually, this pile, not just fit cross-training, this is a pile of the manuscripts of my novel series, my Tales of Chetzemoka series. These are the original rough drafts of the various books in that series. And you can actually see, when I wrote A Trip and a Tumble, I kind of ran out of money. And I was so broke I couldn't even buy real notebooks, so I just made a notebook out of some paper that I had, so. Yeah. And then this little book that looks like an address book is actually where I keep all my characters straight. So I keep all the details of, so Ken was born in 1862. He's a trick rider. He rides a 56-inch high wheel bike, brown hair, a little lighter than his sister Addie's, blah, 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 etc., etc. So that's how I keep my characters straight. But anyhow, here's a question of why I write things out this way, longhand, physically. Because due to the way that the publishing industry works these days, I still have to type it out after it's written out, after it's drafted. So obviously most people say, oh, but it would be so much faster to just type it out to begin with. There are good reasons I don't do that, and I'm going to explain why. So, in the first place, if you are from anywhere but America, or if you've been anywhere but America, you probably already know that most world cultures value handwriting a lot more than modern America does. It's actually a strangely American thing to be so negative about handwriting, and I don't know why Americans are so weird this way. Other cultures value it a lot more highly. Now, why? So, there are good reasons why writing things out by hand is a helpful practice, because we're creatures of a physical space, and I've talked about this before, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but it's a really important point that people tend to forget these days. We evolved in a physical space, we live in a physical space, we live in 3 dimensions, and everything about the real world is a physical space. Now, when we actually physically write things out by hand, we are taking advantage of that aspect of being physical creatures. We are taking our thoughts, which are very abstract, and putting them into a tangible, concrete form on the page. An actual page that we can touch and feel. And when we read books, actually this has the advantage of being able to go back, and a part of our mind physically remembers where in the book we saw something, where in the book something happens. And it's just like we remember where on the road we saw an animal or an event happening, or where in the forest something happened. It goes back to very primal stuff. And in terms of writing, when we're talking about writing this much, that same effect kicks in. Just like if I'm reading a book, I can have some vague idea of where in the book I read it. When I'm writing something, when I go back to reference what I have written, I know vaguely where it is. So there's that advantage, that we're creatures of a physical space, and we work best in physical spaces. And there's a relationship of the hand to the word. Now, another big advantage is that writing things out longhand, it forces a linear narrative. And Gabriel and I discussed this a little while ago. You can watch that video if you like. And linear narrative is a really important part of storytelling. It's an important part of getting ideas out into the world. Because to make any sense, to be comprehensible, ideas have to have a beginning, middle, and end. And when things are written out on a page, it goes in a linear fashion. Our writing system is linear. In English, we write from left to right. In certain cultures, they write up to down. But either way, it is a very sequential way of putting down thoughts and putting down ideas. Computers don't work that way because, especially the way a lot of people type these days, when computers first started getting really, really popular, and to the extent that it seemed like everyone had them, or nearly everyone, people still were holding some of that idea of linear thought being written out in a linear way, and it did carry over a bit. Nowadays, when I see people type and compose on a computer, I see a lot of people jotting down notes and then sort of going back to the top and putting in more things and jotting down more things, and it's a very haphazard way of writing. And then when they go back to edit it and reread it, if they go back to edit it and reread it, some people don't, then it comes out very disjointed, or at least far less so than if they'd actually written it out in a linear way. And when we write things out physically, we are tied to that linear way of writing. And it's not that I don't add in things when I have extra ideas, but and it's not that I don't delete things. You can see where I've actually crossed out things, and I do that a lot. But it has to happen, and here's a place where I've crossed out a whole page that I decided didn't work for whatever reason. But it has to happen very consciously. It's a little more effort than just scattershotting on a typewritten page. And because of that, it requires more thought. And requiring more thought is a very good thing. Now, writing things out physically takes a little longer than typing. I think when I was in high school, a nice age ago, I typed 60 words a minute, and I think I'm probably still around there. Whereas writing things out, it's slower. I've never actually physically timed myself that way, but it is slower. But again, that's a good thing. It's a good thing to take more time to pause and reflect, because it ends in a better product. It ends in a clearer, more comprehensible written work at the end of things. Now, it also gives a lot of time to clarify any mistakes that I've made, because I do make lots of mistakes. You saw where I crossed things out, and it's good to have time to reflect on those. Writing things out physically also encourages free thought. Now, this is getting increasingly important in the modern world, because a lot of people, more and more these days, are allowing their software programs of various sorts to... The people think they're helping them, but what they're actually doing is... I am going to use the word manipulate on this one. These computer programs are... just the way that they work, it winds up... Hi, Artemis. It winds up, intentionally or unintentionally, changing the way people think about things. I recently was trying to help someone with a paper that he was writing for school. And it was really interesting watching him, because he would type just a few letters, and this was not a small child, this was a college student. He would type a few letters and then choose from a drop-down menu of spelling suggestions a word instead of typing out the word on his own, which first time I saw that, I thought that was very, very strange. But when I talked to other college students, they said that, yeah, people do that, which sort of threw me for a loop because it's not something I would do. But anyhow, there are people who do that, where they just type a letter or two and then let the computer dictate what they're going to say. And at that point, they're not really composing their own thoughts. They're not really having their own free style of thinking about things, which is very, very important because it's part of what makes us human. Well, cats have their own free thoughts too, but we won't go there. But it is very important that we get our own thoughts out in the world. And if people are just relying on technology to come up with thoughts for them, then the danger is that we get fewer and fewer imaginative, free, new thoughts coming out into the world, because at that point it just becomes regurgitated. It becomes just what is the most common thing that other people have said they thought. And then it becomes this ever-reduced, just very limited way of looking at the world, which I think is very sad. And it's too bad. It's not what it means to really be expressing ourselves. And the beauty of writing is that it does let us express ourselves. It's an art form. I mean, any sort of word craft is a craft. It's an art form. And we need to treat it as such. And so, another thing about writing things out by hand, because it does encourage that free thought, it helps to spur imagination and spur ideas and spur connections between things. And so, the next time you find yourself stymied and unable to get past a mental block of writing or otherwise, try writing out your thoughts by hand and see if that helps. And I have a fair idea that it will. So, that's my little advice for the day. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a nice thumbs up. And remember to tell your friends about my books. Happy reading!